Hello everyone, welcome to my patch 15.4 mid lane tier list. Now there's a lot to talk about in this patch, so there's been a bunch of changes themselves. I've also just moved some things around and I've added some new champions to the tier list itself, so that'll all be timestamped in the description below if you want to skip around. So we'll start off by talking about actual just champion changes. So our first one here is Diana. So these changes were intended to make Diana jungle weaker while also giving a little bit of strength to Diana mid. To be honest, Diana jungle still seems really broken, and now Diana mid is a little bit better. So it's not huge changes, right? Like 10 damage on Q. That being said, it's a pretty spammable ability and it's also quite hard to dodge. So I think it does add up for sure. Especially because like the way Diana trades at the moment is, like she's probably going to either in certain lanes take electrocute and really try and fish for the kill, adding up with all the extra damage from sudden impact, electrocute, scorch, etc. Or in her phase rush trades, right? If she goes in, she is going to get the extra damage from W. Again, it's not a whole lot, but maybe it adds up a little. I don't think I've moved Diana a whole bit. I think I moved her a little, but honestly, I think Diana is, if anything, she's just better than she was before because like now she's a credible flex pick, right? Like now she can be played mid realistically alongside the jungle, and that benefits both roles. I still think it's like kind of counterpicked here, and I have seen a few pros and stuff experimenting with it. So overall, like I think it's underrated. Even before the patch, I thought Diana mid was underrated. When I was in Korea, I played against a very good Diana one trick a few times, and it felt really hard to play against. So yeah, I think it has potential, but I actually don't think it's like that buffed by the changes itself. Ekko's in kind of a similar boat, so Ekko got 10 extra base damage on his Q. Now, as far as I know, this doesn't affect any actual breakpoints in his Q for the laning phase. I don't think it allows you to like one-shot the backline or anything a wave earlier, but I'm just not really sure on that. Again, though, like it's kind of nice, right? Like you clear the jungle slightly faster, which makes him like more likely to be picked in jungle, which makes him a better flex pick, and that makes it easier to get mid matchup. So again, I think I've moved him up a little bit, but it still remains kind of a situational counter pick. Again, another underrated champion. If you can get a solid Ekko matchup and start snowballing, or just get to your kind of mid to late game side laning in a reasonable position, I think the champ is quite good. Hwei, I've gotten a lot of questions about how Hwei is after the nerfs. So the Hwei nerfs, I mean, let's take a look at them. So first off, there is quite a bit of less damage here on the passive, right? Like it's pretty common that in team fights you will proc a lot of different passives on, if people are grouped up or whatever. But again, it's like it's AP scaling, so it's like you're not really gonna feel it early game, and also like Hwei doesn't hit high AP for like a pretty long time, so you're probably not gonna feel that much. This one you'll definitely feel in the early game if you're going for QW trades, but the thing is, again, it's not super common, right? So like 20 less damage at the first rank is quite a big deal, but it does get back to normal by the time it's max. So the main time you're going to feel this is in a very early trade. If you try and do something like EE into QW, like then you'll definitely feel the lack of damage. But again, like in your early lane, a lot of the time you can just EE into QE, and like that'll push the wave and stuff as well. So it's not like you're super reliant on this. You might feel it in some early skirmishes maybe, where like someone else CCs and you try and follow up with QW. But again, I don't think it's a huge deal. And the WE, I mean, again, a little less damage on the autos, which is kind of annoying because it means you push like ever so slightly slower, and the lower AP ratio again, which I think does add up, right? Because like this is going to be proccing, well, 3 times. So yeah, overall, like they are reasonable nerfs, I think, but they also don't really change in my mind, like what makes Hwei really strong. Like he's still going to be really good at just like putting out tons of CC and AoE slows, etc., into those kind of short range, melee compositions. I have played a fair amount of Hwei since the patch. I think, not sure where the patch was. I think the patch was, yeah, this would have been a new patch. So I've played like a fair amount of Hwei since the new patch. It still feels quite good to me. Damage is still very high. So I didn't really move him a whole lot. I think I still have him. Yeah, actually, I don't think I moved him at all. I think he probably is a little bit weaker than before, but I don't think it's like noticeably so that he should be like moved way down. But yeah, he is a little weaker than before. Jayce. So Jayce is one we definitely have to talk about. So this Jayce change itself is like kind of whatever. I was expecting the Jayce changes last patch to be like an overall nerf, because I remember the changes were like basically they were trying to incentivize you building the AD build instead of the tank build. But what actually ended up happening is rather than people going for the tank build of like Unending Despair and Fimbulwinter and stuff, is they just started going this like off-tank build where you go like Tyr, Shojin, Manamune, Cleaver, and I think it's really strong. If you have a look at like a lot of Korean pros, you will see Jayce pretty high on the win rate here, and a fair amount played fairly recently. So I think that Jayce is strong because like there are not that many like OP AD mids, especially not ones that are blindable, and Jayce gets a lot of value because he is a flex pick. I think with the tankier build, he is sort of, yeah, well, he is blindable, which is nice. And also, you can still build a tank build, like ultra worst case. If you're in some like literal unplayable matchup, you can still rush Unending Despair if you really want to. I would say you probably don't need to, though. Like, Grasp is already so strong in lane. You're getting the Resolve tree. You can rush health. But yeah, overall, I think Jayce, I rated him way too low in the previous patch. Really underestimated the ability to just still go off-tank builds. I might have him slightly too high here. There are some bad matchups, but again, I think the flex pick potential and the fact that he's like one of the top lane blinds as well, so it's like not immediately obvious. You know, sometimes it's like, okay, this champ's a flex pick, but it's like only really a counter pick for like top lane, for example, but it's like a blind pick for mid, so it's kind of obvious it's going mid. But with Jayce, I don't think that's the case. I think that Jayce is a true blind in both mid and top, and so like if you pick him early, they're not going to know for sure. So I do quite like Jayce. Our next mid change, Mel. So this is a big one. So let's go through the Mel changes because I've seen a lot of controversy about this. So first off, okay, the Q. So lower cast range, I actually think that is kind of whatever. I don't think that makes a huge deal. But okay, projectile speed being down, I think that is like a reasonable nerf. So in lane, it's pretty hard to like guarantee hitting all your missiles. And like this probably does mean that on average you hit like one less. And so that does add up to quite a lot of missing damage. That being said, are you looking to like get kills early in the lane as Mel or really chunk people out? Like, not really. Normally, Mel in lane, you're kind of like farming early. If you are queuing people, it's mainly to get like the Comet and the Scorch proc and stuff early. And then where most of the kills come out on Mel is around that kind of like level 7, level 8 mark, you know, where your E is starting to get more powerful, and like if you can hit an E and then follow up with a Q, sometimes you can chase them down with orders and ult them. But yeah, it is annoying, especially for the first few levels, and probably the biggest time you'll feel this is in like difficult matchups early. If you're playing something against like a Syndra or an Ori or a Viktor, you probably will feel the, I guess, lack of trading power now. But again, you were already losing those lanes, so it's not like suddenly you had winning lanes that were turned into losing lanes. I think it's more just they're going to become more difficult. Now, the W is mainly a skill nerf, or I guess like they made it harder to use. So duration being down, I really like that. Really, really like that. I think that the W is powerful enough that it should be very punishing to use wrong. And so like, you know, tightening up that window and making sure that like you have to kind of react with it rather than just like popping it preemptively, I think is pretty good. Mana cost being up, kind of whatever. And reflected damage, yeah, again, I think is kind of whatever. Like, I guess you'd feel this sometimes, you know, there are certain kind of niche cases, like, for example, reflecting like ulting Twitch's autos or something, you know. But for the most part, I think the reflected damage is actually kind of whatever. It's more like the CC that you're going to get or just the ability to neutralize damage. I actually think this should be like further nerfed, to be honest. Either again, like even more duration, maybe down to 0.5, or get rid of some of the damage immunity, maybe make it like 50% damage reduction or something. Now, the E. This is the biggest nerf by far. I think, like, you know, again, this nerfs, like, weaker Mel players, and this, I think, is kind of, it's not cosmetic, but it's not, like, a huge change. But this one's a really, really big nerf. So the root duration on your E eventually is the same when max, but at rank 1, and this is the ability you max second, so you won't get a second point in it until level 8, is down by, you know, a whole 0.5 here, which is pretty significant because if you have any sort of early skirmish, you know, at least previously, being able to hit this really long route, you know, not only means that, like, you can follow up with all your damage. I think that'll still be the case, right? Like, 1.25 seconds is definitely enough to hit all your missiles. But it meant that, you know, your team could follow up. You could potentially kite away if they were chasing you. So I think that is a pretty significant nerf. And to me, that is, like, the biggest change, and it does nerf the early game quite a bit, and that in combination with this is definitely making your early game like a little it's making it kind of like a zero Viktor maybe, where it feels like you definitely don't want to get involved in like too many skirmishes early unless your team is quite strong and you can kind of like play off them and get killed. Maybe it's not quite as extreme as those two, right? Like, you're not that bad at skirmishing, but it is a pretty big nerf. The compensation, though, they did buff the base damage at later ranks, which is nice, or as it goes up. And also AP scaling, which is nice too, because people were complaining about how poorly Mel scaled, which I honestly don't think Mel scaled that badly, but it's true that she didn't scale as well as some of the other mages, so there was always that. I think a lot of like Mel's bad scaling was because of people building wrong, though. And then, yeah, finally, so the ult here, now this is pretty big, I would say. So it's like damage per overwhelm stack is up by 1% AP. And now a lot of the time, like when you are like looking to kill people, you will have them at like pretty high stacks, you know, like you will see sometimes on your R if you're like, you know, mousing over it or whatever, you will see that like in a team fight, you can easily be on something like 60 stacks in your R, whether that's like all stacked on one person or more likely like spread out on multiple targets. So having like an extra 60% AP ratio essentially on your ult is pretty ridiculous. You know, like that is really, really good for the late game. Definitely incentivizes, I think, like death cap third a little more, which I was already doing, but you know, like a lot of people were going for that kind of, you know, like going for either Seraph's Blackfire Liandry or more likely going like Blackfire Cosmic Liandry or something like that. There's a lot of different builds. So yeah, I guess like overall, what do we think of Mel? I still think Mel's pretty good, and this is a pretty controversial opinion. So a lot of people think Mel was like complete trash previous patch before the nerfs. I was not in that camp. I think Mel was still like very, very broken. I have played one Mel game since the new patch and honestly didn't really get to try it. Like it was just like a 15-minute GG. That was this game here, where yeah, we basically just won in 15 minutes and there wasn't much to it. I decided to look into some more Mel stuff because obviously, you know, I didn't want to base everything off my one game. So I saw a game that hold on, that's a spoiler. We'll see that later. I saw a game of Caps playing up against Mel, which was this game here, and I went and watched this replay. And I think Mel still looked pretty powerful. I mean, the Mel actually got multiple solo kills on Caps, which is basically just, again, what I said, like hitting an E at like level 8 or whatever, and suddenly just getting a solo kill. And obviously, like being able to outperform a bad matchup like this against a good player is, you know, signs of life. I don't think we can base everything off one game, but, you know, just saying. And then some other things I saw kind of levied towards the Mel was the win rates. So win rate is a bait stat. Win rate really does not tell you a whole lot, so I don't want to read too much into this, but I'll just kind of like go over it. And I am going to make a longer video talking about win rate specifically. But if you take a look, I think trends is like a reasonable way of saying like, okay, how does a nerf affect it, right? So if we look at Gold Plus, we can see the Mel win rate, you know, it has gone down. And that says, okay, like that nerf is like fairly sizable, right? At the same time though, like as you go up the ranks, so I think if you go to like Diamond Plus, or maybe if we even go to like Master Plus, right, you can see that she gained win rate. And so like, again, it's like probably small sample size, or maybe the nerfs like, you know, impact people that were like using the W badly before and now actually getting punished for it, right? Or maybe like the reduced cast speed on Q punishes people that are not as good at skill shots, right? And I would say like 48% win rate in high elo for a champ like this is actually pretty good, right? Like it's not a super easy champion to play. And then I don't know, if we go to Challenger, yeah, like it's, but like I said, I don't put a whole lot of stock in win rate. So like this is not telling me that Mel is OP. This is more me telling you like don't rely on just win rate. And if we want to go look at like other stats as well, we can come to Lolalytics, probably the best stats site. You know, we've got what, 46% win rate in Plat Plus. If we go all the way up to like Grandmaster Plus, suddenly we've got a 50% win rate, which is actually quite good. And just to once again reiterate, like sample size very small. I don't care about win rate at all. But if you guys are using win rate as your main argument, like I think you've got to consider that as well. And finally, like Mel is still getting like a fair amount of play from pro players. So clearly like these people still at least think it's strong. So like I said, I put Mel here. I think she's definitely still within the A tier. Where in the A tier, I'm not totally sure. I haven't played her enough to say. I think now she might be like more of a counter pick as opposed to a blind, right? Like if your laning phase is a bit harder and your early game's a bit weaker, maybe you need to make sure that you're in games where you can consistently scale, or if you're in a game where you know you're going to do really well in the enemy comp later, like if they do have a lot of short range or a lot of low mobility, because mobility can be quite annoying for Mel, you know, getting her stacks up. So yeah, I don't know. I could move her around with an A tier. I'm still not 100% sure. I just felt the need to talk a lot about Mel because it's a super controversial champ at the moment. A lot of people think Mel is just absolutely atrocious, never pickable. And then there were people like me before that thought Mel was like very, very good. So yeah, that is basically the full Mel discussion. Then the last one on our change here is Yasuo. So Yasuo is basically just getting increased damage. And this is combined with a couple other things. So there was like the IE change to make it like a little cheaper. And then there was also steel caps getting nerfed. So overall, like Yasuo is definitely a little better. The thing is though, I think Yasuo is so situational a pick anyway that you can't really be picking it that often. That being said, the exception of that is if you have a Diana on your team. So like I think I don't think I moved Yasuo a whole lot, but I think if like Diana jungle was more popular or whatever, and that gives you like a lot of opportunities to pick Yasuo. I think for like if you have a Diana on your team, I think Yasuo is like at least A tier, maybe even higher, like depending on what kind of comp you're against. And also like Yasuo is sort of a flex pick. Like you do see Yasuo AD and even Yasuo top sometimes, but like I said, it's not really a blind pick in those roles. So like if you're picking Yasuo early, people probably know it's mid. But yeah, basically, I think he's a little better. I still think he's very hard to pick, but as a counter pick, he definitely increased in value, and with Diana, obviously, he is extremely strong. There's a couple other item changes here, but the only one I really care about that much is the Symbiotic Soles buff. So Symbiotic Soles is getting picked a little more, or it's getting built a little more, and for a few like niche cases, right? Like there are champs like Quinn, for example, that will rush this out and spam recalls. I sometimes see people build this in matchups that are like bad early. Like I saw someone build, I think they were playing like Aurora versus Syndra, and they just built this instantly. The extra movement speed is really nice. The spam recalls, meaning that you don't lose stuff when you get chunked out, is super, super good. And there also are some specific builds, like the Cho'Gath build that I'll show you guys later in the video, that are specifically built around these. So I think Symbiotic Soles are already pretty good, and are now even better, just getting a little bit of extra movement speed. Before we go any further, a quick reminder that I do several coaching sessions a week in the Mid Lane Academy alongside Coach Curtis, which you guys are more than welcome to come to. By joining the Mid Lane Academy, you'll also gain access to the Discord server, which is a really great place to ask any questions you might have. There is also a coaching library here, which has all the previous coaching sessions listed. So for example, if you want to take a look at Ari's previous coaching sessions, there's a whole bunch of them here. There's a fundamentals section, which is great if you're still struggling at the core components of the game. It's got really detailed analysis on how to learn and improve at each of them. There's also this live commentary section here, which is similar to some of the unranked to master videos I've made on my YouTube channel, where you can come through and again, look at various champions and get a coach's insight as to how they should be played. New guides and videos and stuff are updated and added to all the time. So if you really do want to take your climb seriously, Mid Lane Academy could help you out a lot. So if you want any more information, there is a link to the Mid Lane Academy in the description below. So next I want to talk about just some of the champs that I've moved around, and the first one is Viktor. So I've moved Viktor down a lot, and I think this is more like it's not so much that he just like got weaker. I think I just like overrated him a little bit before. So I think even though Viktor is like extremely strong in the lane and scales extremely well, he does really lack in the skirmishing department, and there are like a lot of fights in the game. So I would say that I'm putting Viktor lower because I guess now I see him more as a counter pick as opposed to a blind, because I think you want to be making sure you're picking him in lanes where basically the lane is just unplayable for the opponent, because you need to really make up for the fact that you just don't offer a whole lot to your jungler early. You know, you're not very good at first dragon or grubs or anything. And a lot of the time those will be contested whether you want to or not. So yeah, basically I've just like moved him down. I think he's still pretty solid, and I think he is a pretty solid counterpick to a lot of the other champs up here, right? Like I think Viktor into like Jayce is still pretty good. I think Viktor into Akshan, Ori is all quite nice. So as long as you can like just destroy your lane pretty much, he's still solid. But be a little careful blind picking him, because of course you can get countered by aggressive support jungles, and if there's a lot of action early, that can make your life pretty difficult. Next big one is Ryze. So I moved Ryze way up, and that's because of a new build that a few people are playing. So basically there's a few takes on this, but it's almost always to do with ghosts. So basically what you're doing is you're kind of using the fact that like Ryze ult is like a mini TP, right? Like you can use it as a tempo cheat to get, you know, from the side lane in order to go mid or whatever. Also, he has very high wave clears. So like when you do go side lane in the mid game, you don't have to be there for long, right? Like normally it's kind of hard to be in the side lane in the mid game without TP, because, well, one, it takes you a while to shove out. Two, if you don't have TP, it takes you a while to get to the fight. But Ryze, you know, can do both. Again, he can ult to mid and he clears the waves very quick. So with this build, you'll pretty much be building the normal Ryze build, but there's a couple differences. So obviously, like I said, the double combat sum, so taking flash and goes, this is quite nice, especially if you take Cosmic Insight, I think, because you're just going to have the cooldown so low. I have seen a lot of people just rush tier 2 boots as well. I've seen a few different takes on this too. So rushing CDR boots for the extra summoner spell haste is an option. I've seen people running the Symbiotic Soles is another one, and you don't have to like literally rush tier 2 boots, you know, like you can just build your normal build if you want and end up upgrading the boots later, but those are all options. And I've also seen people just run this with precision instead. So like Caps, for example, here has just been playing the, you know, your typical Legend Haste cut down secondaries. So it looks pretty strong. I think the time you're going to want to pick it is going to be, I'd say ideally, if you have a jungler that wants to do stuff, you know, like if we look at these games, personally, I would have said it's not very good with a champ like Zyra, but it's really good with like Lee Sin, Zinzao, Hwei, Wukong, etc. All these champs that like want to do stuff on the map. I think, yeah, with champs like Zac, something that wants to like clear, I would not be too happy. And so like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. It would be more OP on Korea because there's a lot of aggressive, you know, junglers and stuff. Like look at this, like Ryze leaks in literally 4 games in a row. So yeah, if you want to play Ryze, this is definitely the build to go for. And I think it probably is blindable because like even the matchups that will like, you know, be this was kind of the case before. The matchups that tend to punish Ryze 1v1 are mostly immobile, and so can be ganked by like the Ryze point and click EW. And now that you also have the Ghost, it's like much easier to, let's say you're going to set up a gank, rather than having to like match flash, like you flash forward, they flash away. Now you can just Ghost on them, they have to flash, and then at the next gank you can kill them. Plus it makes your roaming and stuff even better. You can Ghost down the river, and the cooldowns are so low with the Cosmic Insight or by rushing the City Arbits. So yeah, overall I think Ryze is really good. This is not something I've like really tried the new patch, but from what I've seen, there's some other accounts, I can't remember where, I have like too many tabs open, but there's some other people playing Ryze as well, and it looks super strong, so definitely look into that if you are a Ryze enjoyer. Another one that I moved a little bit that I just wanted to talk about for fun is Zilean. So I have played a few Zilean games lately. If I come here and filtered by Zilean, oops, that's not how you spell Zilean. I've got like 3 wins on Zilean lately, and you've got to be really careful picking this champion because, and the reason he's in C tier is because like all the rest of the champs in C tier, he is really like a hyper-specific response to, you know, having certain champs in the game, right? Like he's really good when he's got champs on his team that he can buff. He really needs to make sure he's not getting hard punished in lane. Like if you versus a strong laning champ, you're basically fucked. And it's also quite good if you're against a lot of melees or if you're against a lot of single target damage. So yeah, I've actually been having a lot of success with it, and I do think Zilean is like kind of OP if you get away with the laning phase. And the thing is, like, getting away with the laning phase on Zilean is like being down like 20 CS. You know, like I think this game here I was laning against Aurora. I was what? Yeah, down like 20 CS at 11 minutes or whatever, which is totally fine for Zilean because you scale so well, especially in a game like this. You know, it's like you've got multiple champs to buff. You've got the Jinx, the Viego, even a Kayle, and then against their team, right? Like the Zilean is super good playing against like the Bel'Veth or the Cassante, also denying like any sort of like the first void reset thing for Bel'Veth. This game, I think I picked it, you know, similar reason. I had like an Olaf bot, and I can't remember why I played it this game. I think I played it because I had a Gwen jungle. Can't remember if I blind picked or not. But basically, yeah, I think that the main reason like Zilean is in C tier for me is because like most of the time it's going to be better to go for Karma or Ori because they kind of do the same thing but a lot safer while being stronger in lane as well. But if you're super greedy, and that's the case with most of these C tier champs, you know, like they do have like sometimes they can be picked, but for the most part they're in here because like other champs more or less do their job easier without you having to invest so much time into these champions, especially because you're only going to pick them very rarely. Finally, I wanted to talk about some of the new champs I've added to the list, and the first one is Cho'Gath. So Cho'Gath mid with the Hail of Blades Symbiotic Soles rush is something invented by Kerberos, and I mean, he's always inventing weird shit, so basically, you know it's good if he came up with it. And pretty much what you do, as far as I know, is you just use Cho'Gath's like insane lane sustain to just like tank the damage from your opponent more or less. If you hit a Q, you can follow up with like your Hail of Blades autos, and then by rushing Symbiotic Souls, you can just like spam push waves, reset over and over. You can have a lot of pressure on the map by running to other lanes and stuff, which seems very strong. I put it in B tier. That's because despite having played on a US like about 100 games now, I actually have not played against it yet. It's possible that it should be in the A tier, right? Like, because it seems like it'd be reasonably blindable. It's a flex pick. People probably don't know what to play into it. But again, like lack of info for me made me put it in B tier, but potentially it should be higher. I'm just not really sure. Next one we have is Karma. So I think Karma, like I said in the video I made about it a few days ago, the Chovy video, I think it's very good. I think that as a flex pick, it has a lot of value, both between mid-top, but also mid-support. And I think it can also be useful to like take it away sometimes. So this is maybe more of a higher elo thing, but like you'll often see Caitlyn paired with Karma, or you'll see Ezreal paired with Karma. Like I think those are the best ones. So if like the enemy team takes Caitlyn or something and you're able to play Karma mid, I think that's actually a really good denial. And almost always they're going to think it's support in that case as well. So I do think that's like pretty valuable. It's a pretty solid blind. I would say that like overall, I still think like Ori's a little bit better, but Karma definitely has like more strength in the early game. And honestly, like Ori is a bit more like situational, I guess. Like if there are other carries, especially in like your AD and jungle, I think Ori can be quite good. But Karma actually does more damage than Ori for like probably the first 20 minutes of the game, and spikes earlier too, because you don't like build Steros or anything. So yeah, maybe this should be higher as well. Probably should be a little higher, to be honest, but I wasn't sure exactly where to put it. I think it's very strong, though, and I've had a lot of you guys come to my Twitch chat and say you've had a lot of success playing Karma, and yeah, I think it's very solid. Another one I've put on here is Lucian. So there's a new Lucian build, which is where you play Electrocute and abuse the fact that you have, like, basically this super strong early game with Collector Rush, so getting the lethality. You have the sudden impact, obviously like Electrocute itself does a lot of damage, Scorch. So I think this is really, really good if you're in a matchup where you know that like basically you can kind of E in with impunity. So like if by Eing in, if you're E forward and then you suddenly get CC'd by, let's say, you know, Syndra E, RA Charm, Hwei EQ, etc., I think these matchups are like not that good. So in my mind, it's like more of a counter pick, but I do think that like it snowballs insanely hard. And if you get a good matchup for it, it's probably really, really good. Again, haven't tried this myself, but I think there's like a lot of potential to it. And I think it's always good to like kind of try and find opportunities for AD mids, because AP junglers are still very strong, but most AD mids are actually like quite situational already. So like having more situational AD mids in the pool is quite nice. And then speaking of situational AD mids, the very last one I want to talk about is Quinn. So Quinn, I think is pretty good. I didn't really play against Quinn at all until pretty recently. Like I played against Quinn in Korea last year, but I thought it was pretty trash. But playing against Quinn recently, where they rush Symbiotic Soles and then they rush Tiamat and they just like nuke the wave. They're constantly roaming, recalling. It's really, really hard to play against, even if you're playing something that does counter in lane. So I could actually maybe see this going higher. But I think it is like a bit more situational. You know, it kind of feels like Akshan, but like a little harder to pick. But again, like if you get something that like either does not have the wave clear to match you, or cannot stop you from just like eating directly on them or forcing trades or whatever, I think Quinn definitely has the potential to take over games early while also scaling pretty well. So yeah, I'm kind of a fan of it. I like I said, I used to be a Quinn hater, thought it sucked, but I think with the new Symbiotic Souls, it's gained a lot of value, and yeah, it's now kind of a menace. I don't like Akshan V2. It's very, very annoying. So guys, I think that's going to be it for this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Any other questions or anything, put them there as well, and I will try to reply. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next one.